It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman, and this show is brought to you by emailrevealer.com. Go to emailrevealer.com and check out some of our services like our online infidelity investigation. If you want to catch somebody cheating online, you send us their email address. We'll trace it down there and catch them on online dating websites. Also, check out OppermanReport.com. You go to OppermanReport.com and you can check out our extra content that we have there. We have special shows, extra content, exclusive content that are only available to subscribers. You won't be able to find them live on Friday night or live on Saturdays. Okay, we got a really special guest today. This is a fascinating topic and a really nice guy. Scott Carney is really cool, been very flexible with me today with my scheduling. We're trying to get this trip to California to start filming with Hank Harrison. We got Scott on the line right now. Now, he's the author of this book that's about to come out called The Red Market, on the trail of the world's organ brokers, bone thieves, blood farmers, and child traffickers. So I think that says a lot. Scott, are you there?
I am. How are you doing? Thanks for having me on.
Pretty good, man. I'm doing pretty good. Thank you for being so flexible with me on the time today. I really appreciate that.
I think I missed your first call, actually. I think it's my fault that the time has been messed up.
Yeah, but after that we were even, and then I started screwing up.
Fair enough.
Now I owe you, okay? Now listen, tell us about yourself. Who is Scott Carney?
I'm an investigative journalist and anthropologist, and I sort of started out working in India as a foreign correspondent for Wired and Mother Jones, doing things for National Public Radio and sort of the various sort of major magazines in the United States. And, you brought me on to talk about The Red Market, which is my first book, where I began investigating sort of this underground trade in human body parts and human bodies. And when I'd first heard about this market, I like most Americans, thought it was sort of a fictitious thing, like people waking up in Tijuana missing in a bucket full of ice and missing their kidneys. It turns out that's an urban legend. That doesn't happen. But the reality is actually much more grim. There's $1 billion medical industry looking at various types of human tissue, and it needs to capitalize on other human bodies. And they need regular supplies of organs, of bones, of ligaments, of blood. And the question that I started out with it in this book was, well, what happens when you take a body, a human, and you start breaking them down into their price value? And if you treat humans like you would sneakers, things get very grim very, very quickly.
Yeah, it's almost like a chop shop. When you steal a car, you sell off the parts rather than you sell it all at once. Now, what are the legalities in all of this? Like, what is the most legal stuff that we would be shocked about? What's going on legally?
Well, most of this market is legal in some ways. It's totally legal to get an organ transplant. Like if your kidney fails, you can get a kidney from a donor. The illegal stuff happens when you start buying kidneys, or when you kidnap somebody for their kidney, or when you make a false promise to somebody, saying that you're going to give them some money, and then you steal their kidney. There's lots of ways that it goes wrong. And I think that the thing with the red market, which is so interesting, is that we do live in this nexus where the medical industry is quite powerful, and we have therapies that are life-saving and are important to, if I was dying of kidney failure, getting an organ is a very important thing for me. And and it's a problem that society has is, well, how do you get enough organs to people? And if we're not looking at kidneys, you're also looking at blood. You're looking at ligaments. If you ever had an ACL surgery that had to come from a cadaver, and not every cadaver harvest is totally ethical. And the thing that was interesting about sort of investigating the red market is that once you start looking at bodies as commodities, there's just so many ways that you actually gain access to bodies, both ethically and legally, whatever that means, and unethically. And you know, you can just really head down a rabbit hole, which I did for about 5 or 6 years.
About 10 years ago, my brother down in Florida, he had a whole bunch of stuff. He needed a new kidney. He needed a new liver. You know, you can donate half your liver. It grows back. But his liver was no good. His kidney was no good. Then while he was waiting for that stuff to come, they had to put a stent in for his heart because his heart was going too.
Oh, my Lord.
Yeah, I know. They transplanted. They got him the kidney. They got him the liver. They did the stent. Then after that, he needed a hernia operation on top of that. Okay. I know, man, but he's walking around good now. I tell you, right before the surgery, we thought we lost him. But now I remember that because I was going to donate him my liver because they said it grows back. Okay, fine. But then we found out that you can't because down there in Florida, they only take cadaver organs. Mm-hmm. So now what could he have done if he says, okay, I really need this, I'm on the black market, what can I do?
Well, I have to be a little careful with giving you a step-by-step way to go purchase a kidney. I get a lot of emails from people looking for body parts,
yeah.
and I don't really want to provide people the routes to doing it. But suffice it to say, there are various organizations internationally that look very respectable, and if you approach them, you can get your organ transplant. You know, if you're going to, for instance, I did most of my work in India. You know, you have kidney failure. You contact a major hospital there. They might just be able to tell you that they can get you an organ, and usually what they will do is contact someone in a village, or a slum, a very poor person, and convince them to sell a kidney for sort of a very low rate, and then sort of not even pay them what they promised. And then they'll tell you it's ethically sourced and there's nothing to worry about, and you'll get your kidney and you'll go home and you won't even know the extent of the crime.
And what happens to the person that donates the kidney? Do they live through this?
Usually, yeah. I mean, you have two kidneys, and you can survive reasonably well with one. I mean, your long-term life expectancy probably goes down. But see, here's the thing: if you start looking at the body as just another thing that you can buy and sell, then who are the winners and losers in this game? It's the world's poor providing human flesh for the world's elite and the world's rich. And it's not like someone in that slum is ever going to get a kidney if their kidneys fail. And we've sort of created this system where sort of the laws of human inequality go straight to the way we possess our bodies. It's very dehumanizing. And there was this one village that I when I started looking at kidneys, there was this village outside of Chennai, which is a South Indian city, sort of on the east side of the continent. And there was the tsunami that happened in 2004, and millions of people were displaced, and a lot of them went to these refugee camps. And what a refugee camp is, this, if you look at it from sort of a straight economic perspective, is just a wellspring of human tragedy. And the easiest way to find somebody who wants to donate their kidney is to find somebody who's very, very desperate. And so organ brokers descended on these villages, and all up and down the coast of India, they were convincing people to sell. So when I went there and I visited these camps, I could find 80 women all lined up, all with these kidney scars, because they were all selling their organs. And you make this sort of dystopian reality, but you do it with very high-end medical facilities.
Okay, so you literally saw that many women with these scars?
Oh well, yeah, well over that. I've seen many people who've given sold their kidneys. Yeah.
Okay, I had no idea that this was that common. Now, even still, these women now they would sell their kidney, but they would still be there, stuck in the refugee camp because there still wasn't enough money to get them out of there.
Oh yeah, I mean, they'll be offered something like $2,000, right? Half payment advance, half payment afterwards, and then they go get their surgery, and then the broker says, "Oh, actually, I'm not going to pay you the rest." And what can you do at that point? But even $2,000, that's just a ridiculous thing. It's not like this is your golden ticket, and all of a sudden you're done with poverty. If that was the case, maybe we could talk about an ethical sort of organ thing. But usually, it's to pay off a debt, it's to get a dowry, to do. They look at their bodies as a sort of bank account, and that's incredibly disgusting. And then there's, of course, worse instances, right, where people were literally kidnapped out of bus stations and drugged, and then they wake up in these rooms in Delhi, where their organs were taken, and then they're released at the end of that. I mean, the thing is that India does have very good surgeons, so that the operations are usually not, deadly. They're not taking both kidneys and just leaving you to die. But it's still very, very, it's a problem.
Now, if I'm a poor person in India and I say, okay, listen, I want to get into this, I want to sell my kidney, are there newspaper ads and TV ads? How do they find where to go to sell their kidney?
No, it's totally illegal there.
Okay.
It's just that it happens. Usually a broker will be looking for people and will approach you in person. And the broker might be somebody who's already sold their kidney. They said they want to get a little bit more money, get in on the action. Actually, that's the most common thing that I saw, is sort of that your brother sells the kidney and then he wants to get a cut of your kidney, so he asks you to sell yours, and sort of networks that way. It's and there, of course, there are higher level people, some more organized crime people, but at the very top, it's these doctors in white lab coats who are talking to you and making $30,000-$40,000 in the operation.
So like Amway, right? The guys at the top make all the money, and then you got to sell to your relatives.
You always want to be at the top of the pyramid.
That's right. Okay, now how did you stumble on this originally?
Well, I was living in Chennai as a foreign correspondent, and I read in the newspaper that there was almost a riot at a local government meeting of some tsunami refugees who were trying to get more sort of resources for their refugee camp. They wanted fishing nets and tractors and things like that. Okay. And in order to highlight how desperate their plight was, one of the people at the meeting mentioned that all the women were selling their organs, and then that's what hit the paper. And then I came in shortly thereafter. It turns out they didn't really get the things they were asking for, but we did learn about this. This horrible set of crimes. And then, I was also working on, I didn't just look at kidneys. I also would be reading papers, and I'd hear about a cache of skeletons up in Bengal, which is sort of also on the east side of India. And I was like, why are police investigating 100 skeletons? What's that about? So I would take a train up to Bengal, and I discovered that there's a booming industry for human medical skeletons, where people will, every doctor in the United States and Germany or all around the world, they need to study human anatomy, and you can do it on a plastic skeleton, but it's so much better if you have a real anatomical skeleton. And it turns out that Calcutta was the leader in the business of producing skeletons, and at the height of the industry in 1984, they were exporting 60,000 human skeletons a year to doctors all around the world. And if you think about that, every doctor with their medical textbooks, when they sign up for their freshman courses, buys a skeleton for $300, and they all have one. And what was going on to meet this demand is that everyone who died in Calcutta and who was buried was dug up, defleshed, and sold. And that was made illegal in 1984. The price of human skeletons, of course, went up. Now skeletons are about $5,000 or $6,000, and criminals have entered more criminals have entered the game, and came across one of them in Bengal, and I came to their tarp setup where they were defleshing humans, and it was the business still continues, and they're being sold in the United States as well.
And when you say they're defleshing humans, they're digging up corpses and defleshing them, or they're getting the humans otherwise?
Yeah. I mean, usually it's dead people. You have to find. You sort of read the local newspapers and see who's dying, and certain people are worth more. So if a pregnant woman dies, her skeleton and her fetus skeleton sell for more on the market because it's sort of a rarer anatomical property, and it happens all the time. And so I've confronted these bone dealers, and as a result of this, there were some police cases filed, but it absolutely is still going on.
You got to be careful confronting them. They look at you as a payday. You're walking around.
Not so far, I've been okay.
But you're walking around with them bones.
Precautions. Yeah.
Now, is this unique to India, or you find this in other countries too?
All over the place. In fact, since the book came out, I'm one of the probably 3 or 4 experts on the body trade in the world. Every time there's a major natural disaster somewhere, I'll get a call or an email from someone saying, "Hey, is there a way that I could capitalize on this? And what's the legality of exporting skeletons or hair or ligaments from this country?" I know there's a market. So I actually get organ brokers contacting me for tips relatively regularly. And of course, people contact me about selling their kidneys and things like this. So incidentally, don't anyone listening to this program, please don't do that. I don't give out that information. Should probably just report them to the police, but what can you do?
Yeah, and really, what kind of a police investigation is going to come out of that? It's really nothing.
And very difficult too, because if you think that international organ trafficking is very difficult to police, because there are the laws are different in every country. Usually at the end of the day, when you talk to a doctor, they're saying, "I'm saving lives. I just saved this person's life," and that's usually a wealthy person, right? Mm-hmm. They show some, like your brother in Florida. He probably didn't need to buy things on the black market, but you find this sort of upright professional American who is able to afford $50,000 or whatever it costs for these transplants, and then you look over into the third world, like in Brazil or Egypt or any of these other countries that are doing this, and it's a poor, destitute person. The police don't care. They're more interested in the money. So it's a very, very difficult problem to get any interest in solving.
And most of it is, like a poor country like Calcutta, and then they're sold internationally. They're not sold within that country to rich people in that country. It's mostly being...
No, it's also in the country. It's also domestic. Yeah. I mean, especially with kidneys, India has one of the highest diabetes rates in the world, which also means one of the highest incidents of kidney failures. There are 1 billion people in India. So a lot of this is domestic with the poor people selling or having the kidneys taken and going to wealthy people. The one law of organ trafficking is that human flesh always moves upwards and never downwards through a social hierarchy. Right. And it's absolutely an international problem. It's absolutely a domestic problem. It's about the rich and the poor.
And you're saying there's a demand for hair too?
Yeah, that was the only market that I looked at that wasn't a total nightmare, actually. There are these temples in India, in the state of Karnataka, where Hindus will go and shave their head and give their hair as the offering to the gods. The temple's called Tirupati, and actually, there's many, many temples that collect hair. And at the turn in the 1900s, all these temples realized they had just way too much hair to know what they could do with it. They would stuff pillows and mattresses with human hair and sell that. And eventually, it turned out that there was a very high demand in Europe and in the United States and in Africa to make wigs. And so I think there were some Italian dealers in the 1920s and 40s who contacted these temples and now buy just tons and tons of hair that is sold as wigs all over the place. And if you ever see or walking in a black neighborhood, see a black hair salon, they'll say Remy Indian virgin hair all over the place. And it's like $100 a strand. And it's very, very popular. But it's also not terrible. I mean, we're not forcing, wrestling people and shaving their heads forcibly.
Oh, my God. Oh, no, yeah. No, what do you know about people being kidnapped their organs? What did you find about that?
It happens. It's less. It's just more complex, right? If you're a businessman and you're in the organ brokering business, you raise a lot fewer eyebrows if you pay someone a small amount of money. If someone's willing to sell their kidney for $800, why not just pay them the $800 and save yourself the legal case? Yeah. Especially if you're able to turn the kidney around for like $50,000. It's just easier not to kidnap people. I mean, the people who do it are usually the lower end criminals, the people who don't have a real understanding of how the markets work. It does happen. There's a case in Turkey. There's a case in Delhi. There are cases all over the place where this does happen. But I will say that probably the most disturbing market that I came across was for human blood. Again, in India, I'm up in the state called Bihar, on the Nepal-India border. And there was this guy who used to be a dairy farmer. And he also had a past as sort of a nurse working in one of the local hospitals. He realized there was a major blood shortage at the hospitals locally. And he would go to the bus station, say, find some guy who's destitute, say, hey, I'll give you $20 for your blood, which sounded like, a pint of blood. And the guy said, hey, that sounds great. And he would bring them back to his house, drain, put the IV into the man's arm, and then drain not one pint of blood, but 4 or 5 until the person was sort of minimally conscious. And then keep them there, draining their blood once every couple days for up to 8 or 9 months at a time. When he was discovered, he had 16 people in his cow sheds that he was, sort of keep milking like cows to meet the local blood demand in that city. So, I mean, that was just, it's like, we're talking like real life vampires here, right? And the medical industry was more than happy to accept this blood, no questions asked, and sell it to their patients.
Well, now here in the States, when you go to sell your blood, they make you take all kind of medical tests and stuff like that. Like the whole first trip there is like this whole day-long barrage of testing that they give you.
I see you're familiar with it.
Well, yeah. When people owe me money, I take them down. I want to get paid, But I am a little bit familiar with it. Yeah. I guess down there's no kind of a screening of this blood. Then how does it get into the general use?
Oh, screening. Yeah, I mean they may test it for hepatitis or HIV on the back end, but no, they just need the blood. The screening is not necessarily a top priority.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So then that blood that's really not being, if it's coming from some guy's cow farm, you know what I mean? And this blood's going into circulation. Does that blood get to the United States? Probably not, right?
No, actually, the United States is a net blood exporter. The United States produces more blood, I think, than any other nation on Earth, and I think we sell. You can check the numbers in the book, but off the top of my head, I believe it's like $2 or $3 billion of blood we sell abroad every year.
Okay, now isn't some of that blood that we sell blood that people donate to the blood bank?
Oh, almost 100% of it is, yeah. Actually, I believe 100% of it is. So when you go and give blood to the Red Cross, the Red Cross then will then take that and then sell that for about, I think it's $300 a pint that they sell. And the Red Cross is an incredibly profitable nonprofit. And, you might think that this is a gift, and you might be giving this freely from the kindness and generosity of your own heart, but that doesn't mean that they're not treating it like a commodity on the market.
Right. And what they'll do is, if there's a school shooting or something like that, a bunch of people go down and donate blood there in that neighborhood thinking that they're doing somebody some good. but it gets sold to foreign, not even to our own country, to foreign countries. It gets sold overseas, I guess, right?
Absolutely.
On the world market. Isn't that wonderful? Okay. What I tell you, man, what an eye-opener this whole thing is, you know?
Yeah, I mean, once you're, I mean, as I said, I spent about 6 years working on these investigations, and every time you're just astounded by how deep, how prevalent these industries are. I mean, in the book, I believe I only go through 10 or 12 different ones, but I think I could have spent my whole career looking at different ways bodies are bought and sold. And there was an amazing investigation by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists about 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, where they were looking at ligaments being bought and sold in like the Czech Republic and Prague, you know, where they would be just stolen from funeral homes, and then, you know, those ligaments are then sold, you know, maybe to you if you had an ACL surgery. You never know.
What is that ACL surgery? What is it?
Well, ACL in your knee, when you're, you know, like a football player or whatever, it's a stabilizing ligament, really a big one, and you need it to walk and move around, and lots of people get it, and it's like a big elastic band basically, but made out of ligament, and it's usually harvested from a cadaver. So they'll tell you they'll install this ligament into you from a dead person, and you know, you don't even think about it. You're just like, I have a cadaver ligament in me, but that came from a real person. You know, a real person had to give up that, and the most efficient way to get those organs is not always altruism. It's not always the dead person freely and independently said, yeah, sure, this can go, and it was willed away. In fact, there's scandals all the time in the United States of funeral parlors. You know, when your grandmother dies or your grandfather dies, or a close relative, you know, you'll have a closed casket funeral. What's going on with the body? Well, it could very well be harvested. The bones could be taken out and sold as bone grafts. The ligaments can be sold. The corneas can be sold. If you never look at the body, who's to know? And meanwhile, the parlor might be making, you know, $2,000 or $3,000 on that per body. And, you know, it happens very frequently. And even to famous people, the Alistair Cook, the guy who founded Masterpiece Theater, the original host, his bones were stolen in a sort of very high-profile case that came out. And, you know, sometimes these bodies will have things like bone cancer, and those will go on the market. So it's, you know, but most of the time it just goes unnoticed.
You're saying that like bones that have bone cancer will go on the market to be sold as having bone cancer, or to be sold as healthy bones?
Yeah, healthy bones. Yeah.
Oh, my
I don't
God.
think there's a big market for cancerous bones.
Okay. All right. We're here. This is a depressing subject. Okay. We're here with Scott Carney. The book is, oh, my God, The Red Market, on the Trail of the World's Organ Brokers, Bone Thieves, Blood Farmers, and Child Traffickers. Real quick, before we take this break, Scott, can you tell me what your other books are? So you mentioned you had some other books as well.
Sure. I had a book called A Death on Diamond Mountain about the perils of intensive meditation, where I followed people who, on their quest for enlightenment, ended up dying on those quests, and what the connections are with that. I wrote a book about, you know, how to be a freelance writer called A Quick and Dirty Guide to Freelance Writing, and that's an ebook. And I also have a book coming out in January called What Doesn't Kill Us, about how to use the environment to train your body.
Okay, great. We have Scott Carney. He's the author of The Red Market, on the Trail of the World's Organ Brokers, Bone Thieves, Blood Farmers, and Child Traffickers. Also writes for Mother Jones, one of my favorite magazines for years and years, back when it was a magazine. And also to Wired magazine.
It still is, isn't it?
It's online, though. Can you buy it in a paper?
Yeah,
oh,
I
you
think
can.
So. I believe you still can. Yes.
Do they still have magazine stands? I haven't seen one in 20
I know,
years.
right?
Okay, we'll be back with more of Scott Carney right after these messages.
Thank you.
Sure.
Five-minute break.
I haven't talked about the Red Market. What are you on? The Ed Opperman report. Opperman.
This is your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. And if you're enjoying the show right now, there's more. You can get more. You can go to the Ed Opperman YouTube channel, and you could subscribe there. And we have archives of all of our past shows for over the past 3 years, about 200, 300 shows. You can also go to the Opperman Report Spreaker channel, and you could follow us there. Again, a ton of shows, about 300 shows on there. And whenever we do an impromptu show, an emergency-type broadcast that we do during the week occasionally, you'll get an email notifying you of breaking news and spontaneous broadcasts that we may do during the week. You can also go to OppermanReport.com and become a member. If you become a member, you help support the free archives on Spreaker and YouTube, and you help support the free shows on Friday evening and on Saturday evening. Each of these shows, Friday evening and Saturday evening, are carried for free on 7 internet stations, okay? So you help support that, but also, too, at OppermanReport.com in the members section, we have exclusive content. Shows that are recorded during the week that are only available to members. So please check out OppermanReport.com and help support the show.
The son of a Polish immigrant who grew up in a Brooklyn tenement, Bernie Sanders. He went to public schools, then college, where the work of his life began, fighting injustice and inequality, speaking truth to power. Bernie moved to Vermont, won election and praise as one of America's best mayors. In Congress, Bernie stood up for working families and for principle, opposing the Iraq War, supporting veterans. Now he's taking on Wall Street and a corrupt political system that holds up a rigged economy. Bernie's campaign is funded by over 1 million small contributions from people like you. He's fighting for living wages, equal pay, and tuition-free public colleges. Bernie Sanders.
People are sick and tired of establishment politics, and they want real change.
Bernie Sanders. Husband, father, grandfather. An honest leader. Building a movement with you to give us a future to believe in.
I'm Bernie Sanders, candidate for president, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Bernie 2016.
Check out strawmanmusic.com. Sean Duff is our webmaster here at the Opperman Report, and he's a very talented musician. He's part of a band called Strawman. They're based up there in Canada. Don't hold that against them. These are like-minded folks. If you like the shows you hear on the Opperman Report, you'll like the music that they have over at strawmanmusic.com.
Enough is enough. Wall Street's greed and illegal behavior drove this country into the worst economic downturn since the 1930s. And then, after getting a huge taxpayer bailout because they were too big to fail, it turns out that 3 out of the 4 largest banks are bigger today than they were before we bailed them out. That's crazy. I'm Bernie Sanders. My plan: break up the big banks who are strangling our economy and make them pay their fair share of taxes. Then we can invest in the middle class, expand Social Security, and provide universal college education. I'll rein in Wall Street behavior so they can't crash our economy again. Will they like me? No. Will they begin to play by the rules if I'm president? You better believe it. I'm Bernie Sanders, Democratic candidate for president, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Bernie 2016.
You know, you can get a copy of my book, How to Succeed as a Private Investigator, if you go to my website, emailrevealer.com. Now, this is a limited edition book, okay? And you can get a signed copy of this book, and it'll be personally autographed to you or whoever you want to give the book to as a gift. Once you have my signature on that book, you can copy the signature and put it on checks and pass them all over the world. Emailrevealer.com. Get a copy of my book, How to Succeed as a Private Investigator.
He's fought injustice and inequality his whole life. Bernie Sanders. As a college student, he was arrested for challenging segregated housing. Bernie marched with Dr. King and thousands of others for civil rights. In Congress, Bernie stood up for working families on health care and jobs. Now he's taking on Wall Street banks and a corrupt political system that keeps in place a rigged economy. Bernie Sanders, a reformer who believes in ending racial profiling and mass incarceration, so the justice system works for everyone. Bernie Sanders.
There is no president who will fight harder to end institutional racism and reform our broken criminal justice system.
Bernie Sanders, an honest leader building a movement with you to give us a future to believe in.
I'm Bernie Sanders, candidate for president, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Bernie 2016.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman, and we are here today with Scott Carney from Mother Jones and Wired Magazine. He's written this book called The Red Market, on the trail of the world's organ brokers, bone thieves, blood farmers, and child traffickers. Now, Scott, how do child traffickers fit into this whole story?
So I was investigating instances of adoption fraud, actually. I mean, there's lots of ways that humans get trafficked around the world. But for me, and what I was looking at was, there's all of these people who come from abroad and are adopted. You know, they're said they're from poor families, from destitute families, and they come to the United States. And I wanted to investigate to see what their real stories were. And there was this one kid that I met. His name was Subash. He was playing by a well in Chennai, and this rickshaw driver came up and literally just picked him up and drove away with him. He was about 2 years old. Taken to an orphanage, sold at the orphanage to the orphanage for I think about $50. And then that orphanage put this child up for adoption, and he ended up with a family in Wisconsin. And so for this chapter, I tracked the child. I tell his story. But the thing that I really wanted to understand is, why would an orphanage kidnap a child and sell it? What's the logic behind it? And it turns out that India has no shortage of destitute children, or children who have no parents, but the orphanages are also very poorly funded. And adoptions in the country don't pay very much. Maybe it's $1,000 to adoption, but an international adoption could potentially make an orphanage $10,000, $20,000. That's a lot of financial incentive to arrange their children to come to the United States. But there's a problem as well with orphanages, is that once you've been in an orphanage for a long time, you start to get developmental disabilities, you get sick, and you're not as easily adoptable as a sort of a fresher child, you could say. So it turns out that the market for adopted babies is very similar to the market for bananas. A child just sort of goes bad. And the orphanages need to fulfill a certain number of international orders, or else they're not gonna make it. So what they do is they resort to kidnapping children, and it's a big problem in India. The one orphanage I looked at was involved in 150 cases of adoption fraud like this. But it's also huge in Korea. It's a big problem in the Czech Republic and Russia, all over the world, because of just because of the way international adoptions work in the first place. So in this one story, I was trying to right one wrong. And I found that the parents in India who had their child kidnapped, and through court records and sort of just investigative journalism, I actually located the family in the United States of Subash, and now it goes by a different name. And I showed up at their door, and I knocked on their door, and I told them the history of their child, hoping to put the family in America in touch with the family in India about 10 years after the event happened. And spoiler, it didn't work. The family said, "Thank you very much. We now know that our child was kidnapped, and we'll never contact the family in India."
But you literally just walked up and knocked on their door with this news?
Literally. Well, I mean, I tried to be judicious as possible, but yeah, I mean, there was no other way to do it.
That's true. You couldn't make a phone call and tip them off, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my God. Hey, this is a brutal work you're doing here, huh?
I know. It was a very dark 6 years.
Okay, 6 years of this. Hey, what about, did you look into this business about this HB1 visas where, especially like these modeling agencies are importing these little kids from other countries to work at these modeling agencies here in the United States, little kids as young as 12 years old?
Never heard of it.
No? Okay. Yeah.
Doesn't surprise me, but yeah, no, I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, well, it came up in the Epstein case, the Jeffrey Epstein case. And
Okay.
yeah, but that guy Jean-Luc Brunel, and they said that he had these access to getting HB1 visas. Have you looked into the visa situation at all?
No, not really.
Okay, yeah, it's a whole nother avenue there. Oh my God. Okay, what else did you uncover in all this kind of work?
Well, I mean, the chapters in the book, I look at hair, I look at bones, kidneys, children. I look at human eggs and surrogate labors. In India, there was and you probably heard of this. You probably saw the Oprah episode where people who couldn't afford surrogates in the United States because that costs about $100,000 were going to India to hire Indian women to carry their genetic material into babies. And Oprah spun it as if this was a women empowering women. The women in India need money. The women in the United States need babies, and it was sort of a meeting of the minds that everything was happy. Unfortunately, what I found, and I was probably one of the first journalists to uncover this, was that there were literally baby factories. They were housing women in these horrible little rooms, keeping them under sort of lock and key for 9 months as they gestated, and then paying them about $8,000, which is not an insignificant sum of money. But some of these there were these medical questions would have come up, like, what do you do when a surrogate who's an Indian woman is poor, has a pregnancy that doesn't go perfectly, and it turns out that you can save the fetus or save the woman. What do you do? Well, the doctors were saving the fetuses. They weren't saving the women. And, there was a couple cases of these deaths happening that way. And it was big business. Thousands and thousands of people were going to India to hire surrogates. Luckily, fortunately, just about a year ago, India finally outlawed the practice. And now it's supposedly moving to Thailand, where you find poor people who are willing to gestate for money.
What do you think would happen in a situation where the baby was born with a deformity?
I believe the cases where that has happened, the family in the United States has rejected them, and then that child is it's a big quandary what you do with the child at that point. Does it end up in the foster care system in India, in an orphanage? Does the child just die? Does the surrogate take care of it? I mean, it's a really problematic thing. And sometimes a surrogate would decide that they want to keep the baby, and that's a whole legal battle as well. It's just a very, very problematic industry.
I tell you, before I met you, it was bad enough. I would look at an iPhone or I'd look at a pair of sneakers, and I would think of the slave labor, working on that. And now this is a whole new nightmare.
It's a deep and troubling thing, and I also found there's a market for human eggs as well. I mean, obviously, when you're trying to get pregnant, you need sperm, you need eggs, you need a womb to get the kid. Those are the ingredients. And, eggs are valued differently in the United States. Somebody goes to like an Ivy League school, beautiful, athletic woman who's 21 years old might be able to sell her eggs on the market for like $100,000. That happens. And if other eggs are valued differently in the market, so a black woman's eggs with no education to speak of would probably be worth a couple $100 on the market. There's a huge array of that. But in America, people who were looking for deals on eggs, they would say, okay, well, I'm going to go buy an egg abroad. And there was this whole industry that blew up in Cyprus, which is that little island in the Mediterranean, that little island nation, where Cypriot doctors were importing Romanian and Turkish women, harvesting their eggs and then sending them back home. And these were discount things, and they were forcing women to, not forcing them, they were hyper stimulating their ovaries so they would produce dangerous numbers of eggs, and these would go on the market and be sold in the United States and to British people and Spanish people. So that was another market that I looked at.
Yeah, it's amazing. They can't just be satisfied, you know. Like you talk about, they have these surrogate mothers down there. Then they have to create a surrogate mother farm. You know what I mean? It's the root of all these problems is greed.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, the whole idea of economies of scale and, you know, yeah, it's not just, I mean, medicine's a business, right? And I think that we lose track of that a lot of times in America because you think that doctors are these, and hospitals and the medical investigators there to help you. But the truth is it's there to make money, and helping you is just one of the things that they might do. I mean, the American medical system is completely broken, as I'm sure many of your listeners know, right? Where, you know, the prices for if you break your leg, that might be a $20,000, $50,000 medical bill. You're certainly not allowed to shop around for price. But that's a whole different kettle of fish.
Yeah, this is probably the only country where you go bankrupt, you know, when you get sick and you wind up in poverty, you know, over it. Scott, yeah. We're down to like 1 or 2 minutes. What do you want to leave us with?
Well, I do hope that people will read the book and they'll just to open their eyes at how prevalent these industries are and just to get a different perspective on the world. But, you know, a lot of people will ask me, what is my solution to this? You know, you've found all of these horrors around the world. What are we going to do about it? Just throw up our hands and walk away, which is really what most of us are doing. But I'd like to argue that the way to fix all of these markets is to think about the human body just a little bit differently and think about when you get an organ transplant, you can't just say, I need an organ. The doctor can't just tell you you need an organ, but you need someone else's organ. All of these black markets thrive through this ethic of medical privacy, where they say, we're going to get you a kidney, and then you just think about it as a thing, and they won't even tell you where it came from. They'll say they're protecting the privacy of the donor, the deceased person or whatever. But that has allowed criminals to get in the middle and monkey with the business and create these horrible, horrible crimes. So what I advocate for in the book is radical transparency, you know, in all flesh markets. Like if you get a pint of blood, you need to know. You need to be able to track backwards to find out where that blood came from, just to protect that donor. It needs to be open in public records. Same for kidneys, same for ligaments and adoptions. All of these records need to be open to public scrutiny, or else we give cover for criminals.
You know what? I bet you, so many of these people that they're willing to spend $50,000, $100,000 to buy a kidney would take that person and say, "Hey, come live with me," you know, you know, and give them a room in their house. You know, who's going to sell them their kidney?
There's no doubt that the debt is not just money, right? Yeah. The debt for saving your life is life.
So true. Scott Carney, thank you so much, my friend. Again, what were those other two books that you written?
A Death on Diamond Mountain is my most recent book. I also wrote a book called The Quick and Dirty Guide to Freelance Writing. And I have a book coming out in January called What Doesn't Kill Us.
Scott Carney, The Red Market, on the trail of worlds, organ brokers, bone thieves, blood farmers, and child traffickers. Scott, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good night. Oh, boy, what a nightmare that was. Okay, we'll be right back after these messages.